I think we'll go ahead and we're going to head to Q&A, I believe, right?
We are. Both you and Elizabeth are seasoned pros. You hit the shot clock on the nose both times, like not even a minute over. It's ridiculous. That presentation was super valuable for me. I can honestly say I got distracted every time you mentioned tacos, as I haven't had lunch yet. I'm gonna keep making that joke because I really want lunch. Um,
Well, you know you're
so
doing too much Amazon when somebody talks about tacos and you're like, "What about the ads?" Oh, wait, no.
I hope I never get it that way. Well, while we're on the topic, I have a couple of personal questions based on what you all have seen. I know there's some conversations we want to expand on a little bit more. So, Robyn, since you're still fresh, before I let you take a breath, you teased it a little bit, but some of the disadvantages of only using tacos by product. I know you touched on them, but can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so we've had clients that have come to us and said, we don't want any room for there to be any like lost, and we want to really manage by product. And there are times and places and product mixes where that is possible. But for the most part, some of the issues that you're going to run into is like, so even on some of our companies that are the clients that we have, that we kind of give it to them as kind of a guiding piece, they'll say, well, how is it that I had, attributed sales for this product of $400, but I didn't sell any of those during that time period? And that's because it was attributed to a different product, and so it can make it so the numbers can be a little off. And what can also happen is, if maybe you have people who are coming in through red, they're clicking and purchasing blue, and it looks like it's 100% tacos. It looks like it's atrocious. But in reality, if we look at the overall numbers, it's actually performing really, really well. And if we're turning it off there, we're actually kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. And we're also kind of losing that ability to see sponsored display and sponsored brands. And so it can also give us kind of a false sense of how much our ad costs are. So, there's a lot of reasons why you should use it as a way to check in, especially if you're like, I don't understand why my performance has dropped, especially if you can put them in groups, that can be really helpful. But especially if you're using multiple ad products, which at this point, pretty much everybody should be using multiple ad products, unless you're selling like underwater basket weaving kits for double amputees where there's not a lot of competition. Like, you're going to need to use more than one thing. So you're not going to get an accurate picture, and so it actually might lead you to overbuy on a specific piece of inventory, thinking that this is performing really well, but you're not attributing to the other money that you're spending in some of these other ad products.
First, I promise this is my last tacos joke. I too am 100% tacos. I swear I am. Um, but I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, the idea of I don't know, maybe we call them entry point products or window shoppers that like they see something they think they want, enter the store, enter the brand page, and then I don't want the blue one. I actually bought the red one instead, but the blue one got them in the door, so we still have to count it. Um, Elizabeth, a question for you. Obviously, there's a million stores out there. Obviously, there's a million e-com stores out there. Um, what kind of media mix do you expect with the addition of retail media, and especially with like the fragmentation of all these different stores in mind?
So right now, I guess the benefit is, because it's newer, is these budgets tend to be a little more segmented within. So one thing that I didn't allude to in the presentation that I don't think maybe the average paid search marketer knows is a lot of these retailers do what's called an annual agreement, vendor income, or JVP, which means that they basically broker with the brand a certain amount of money that the brand is going to spend with them, whether or not that is to drive to the .com, to their product pages, whether that's through like coupon redemptions, whatever it is. All these things count at different varying levels. So those budgets tend to be pretty set. And so within that, then you could say, all right, the media mix is within that universe, that walled garden, versus like say across the universe, right? So you're not also then taking that budget and then configuring in whether or not you're going to spend some on Google search, you're going to spend some on TikTok, or you're going to spend some on external programmatic, because you don't get credit for those dollars with the retailer.
Mm.
So it really depends on what your goals are as a brand and what your commitments have been to the retailer. So you could argue, you can use some national media to fund, let's say you didn't have an annual or vendor income, right? Let's say that you didn't have that. You could media mix from there in terms of, again, it depends on what your goals are. Do you want to buy in store? Do you want to buy online? Are you trying to get new to brand? Are you trying to launch a new product? Are you expanding into a new category? Like, it gets really kind of gnarly. And the other trick to remember too about like vendor income and stuff, some of those retailers, if you don't spend it all, they make you write a check. So the way that you do your business is way different.
Interesting. It's like getting punished for not spending enough, which is
basically
contrary
because you committed, right? You committed.
Yeah. I didn't want to commit. I wanted an idea.
Supposedly you get some stuff for that, but we'll see. Again, it's new.
Actually, I mean, that begs another question. I mean, obviously, retail media is growing, and everyone thinks it's going to spike. How does that not come true? How does that go wrong? And I think, what do you think the blockers are to scaling in retail media?
So that's funny. As I was talking to Andrew Lipson about this last week, we were talking about how does this fail. So the question was, we don't think it can fail. We think we can slow down. We think we can mess up here and there, but the fact of the matter is it's not going to fail. But what the biggest blocker today is the antiquated systems and organizations that are at the retailers, right? So the unfortunate thing is like, so Walmart Connect's only 5 years old, or not even, because they rebranded, it's like 2. But Walmart has been around like, 65 years. They got a way of doing things. And so you're going to, in 4,700 stores. So how are you going to get all of that organizationally aligned to what's next and to support something like retail media, right? So it again, it's I'd say that's probably our biggest blocker in terms of, and it's not even a blocker, it's just going to slow us down.
That's fair. I mean, anything that's different, and again, any habit you have to break, especially for a giant retailer that's been around forever and think
And
they
when
know
people's
everything.
bonuses are tied to things, it is really hard to move it.
I think everyone can empathize with that about trying to break corporate structures. And they're like, well, but I still have to compare you every year, so no.
Yeah.
Robyn, I'm going to ask you a question that I personally hate getting, but I'm asking the question so you get it. Elizabeth, don't you smile too big. You're getting it soon too. You mentioned small budgets, and I, of course, have a sneaking suspicion that our audience has varying levels. How small is too small? Are you looking at, a certain amount per day? Is there a certain, what would you start with?
So the reason we all hate this question is because it really does depend, and not like in a dodging the bullet kind of way, but it really does depend. So if you're trying to launch a garlic press, a yoga mat, a brain supplement, then we're talking probably 5,000, maybe 10,000 per SKU. If you're talking about like a new to category thing to hold wine, then maybe it might be pretty small. We have ads, we have clients that are doing things really amazing things, like driving tremendous revenue with $1,000-$3,000 a month, but they're in very specific niches, and most of their other competitors are non-digitally native, and so they don't having to deal with that head to head, and they have brand awareness. So there are unique situations where a small budget will get you very far. The thing that we want to think about is, and kind of what we look at is, we look at, okay, if we average a 10% conversion and the CPC is this is how much budget we need to get this many sales. So when obviously we want to take all of the tools like Helium 10 and things that estimate with a big giant grain of salt. But we want to say, if number 1 and number 2 are getting 62, 63 sales or 6,300 sales a day, do I have enough ad budget for even some of the broader keyword phrases to get to the top of search? Am I willing to outspend them on some of those keywords to organically get to the top of that search? And for the ones that I can afford, is there enough search volume behind those to provide enough sales to make the Amazon channel worthwhile? Especially when we consider how much costs have increased for manufacturers, sometimes the answer to this is no. You can get to the top of pretty much any search page if your pockets are deep enough, but right now not a lot of pockets don't have that same depth. And we need to think about, are you going to be able to get to a point of profitability? Is it sustainable? Do you have the margins even once you get to a point of stability to hold that position? And does your product have a high enough quality level that you're not going to have a couple negative reviews drive up your ad costs even further? I don't know if that's yeah.
It is. I mean, I think all of us who have been in this space for a long time know that That's a really impossible question to answer, but it's also one that everyone wants to know. But it's interesting. It's a little bit more complex than I think we explore sometimes in the search world, where it's take your conversion rate back out and make sure you have enough data, make sure you can get like a couple of months with all the different factors around Amazon product quality. And this is an interesting question. I actually had a similar question based on your 48-hour comment, but it sounds like there's a vendor that does hourly bid optimization, and I was thinking the same thing with 48-hour lag. How much do we touch the campaigns? How much is too much? Are we better off waiting? And if we are, I mean, how do we handle volatile periods?
Well, so I think that so we kind of built in a lot of safety checks. So, it's not just up the bids, down the bids. It's taking a 60-day look, taking a 30-day look back, and comparing performance of keywords, and, to kind of provide that safety check. And then also not just deleting keywords out, because sometimes a keyword will stop performing because some competitors dumping a ton of money, and that might go away in 30 days or 15 days or whenever they realize it's not profitable. So, just because a keyword is not performing this moment doesn't mean it won't perform later. So we have to have a way to monitor that over multiple match types. And then with, the ability to do that hourly day parting, there's a few companies that do offer that. Unless you have a product that you really see, I mean, you can test it and you can really, you're really seeing that Sundays you're having like a massive blow up day, or you see that, you're seeing that you're because of your customer demographic, they're only going to be able to order at night. So maybe they're shift workers and, they're not going to have access to their phones during the day. And so you want to kind of hold that budget until they're available. Then there is a use case for it. But for most products, because time zones, because people are working from home, it can provide an extra level of complexity that might not be worth the lift, especially if you only have $1,000 ad budget, right? There's only so much fine tuning you can do with that. So unless there's a really good demographic, like customer avatar reason, I haven't seen a lot of people really lean super heavily. And I know that Destiny with Sean, and I believe Leron have also done some testing on that and found that it had, varying results.
So I can tell you that it's not just Quartile. They're using Amazon Marketing Stream, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing
Yeah.
intraday bidding. So a lot of folks, if you're connected to that API, have it. Tenuity, we've run it. And I can tell you that from a case study perspective, it was pretty effective, right? So what it does is on an ROI per hour basis, like it looks better, it looks great, right? 20% better ROI. But you could argue, like to Robyn's point, is it strangling your sales elsewhere? So what we saw was, sure, ROAS got great, but at the cost, and spend went down, but it was at the cost of volume of sales. And that's the trick with Amazon, is because it moves so fast and there's so much, you really got to look at it a bigger picture.
Right. It's about being reactive versus proactive. And is reactive fast enough? Is it reacting to the right data? Can we be proactive and solve some of the problems?
Yeah. And so
like
we
Robyn?
underspent, right, as a part of like the first couple of weeks, because we're like, okay, well, we got to go harder on this.
Right. It's a complicated world. Well, we have 2 minutes left, and you all know where my head is at. But 30 seconds each. Final thought or question I didn't ask that the audience didn't ask that they should have. Elizabeth, you go first.
I was gonna say, just be curious, right? When it comes to retail media, please do check out the ugly Google Doc that I put together that has the list of the things. Like, just read one of those. It's coming. And here's the thing: when it comes to Google and Facebook and that growth relative to, so I might be taking into shopper and trade and national budgets now, but you can't tell me that at some point you take another look and you go, well, maybe closer to the point of purchase, right? Sitting literally right there, Target.com.
Robyn, what about you?
I think it depends. One of the things that I do see people like are just getting started with Amazon or just getting started with kind of paid ads in general is that vanity of going towards a very broad keyword. So, and I know that it's kind of a basic thing, but I think it's something important that we bring up. Like, just because phone is a relevant descriptor for your product doesn't mean it's going to provide a good return, because people searching for phones could be looking for PBX, they could be looking for cell phones, they could be looking for toy phones. So there can be kind of this vanity trap of trying to be top of search for a very broad keyword. And sometimes you might say, well, who's going to look for PBX phones for office systems in Ohio?
You'd be
But
surprised.
yeah, and autocomplete can really mess those things up. So you might go where, the search volume is really on a keyword phrase that has 5 keywords because that autocomplete is bringing a lot of traffic through it. So make sure you're actually looking at the data and not just making assumptions on the keywords. You really want to be looking at what is performing. And then if you see keywords that are performing well that you didn't expect, that's probably an indicator you might want to go back and rewrite your listings because you might have written for the wrong demographic.
Robyn, I'll just say as a closing thought, first of all, thank you both. This was great. I think this is new to a lot of people. It's old to some people, and it was an awesome mix of 101 all the way up to 401, a little bit of a master's degree. So thank you both for that. Robyn, I really appreciate you taking the consumer point of view, especially on Amazon. I think it's so easy to just be like, I'm Amazon. I want to be number one. I want to see myself there. But nobody searches for red shirts. Nobody does. They search for search for stuff that's a little bit more interesting, and they do things that are a little bit more purposeful. So taking it from their perspective as opposed to, what do we want to show up for? It's a much more effective way of doing things. So thank you both. I think we have a 10-minute, what at least for me is going to be a taco break. I lied. There was one more. But thank you both. This was great. I know that I learned a lot, and I think everyone attending did as well.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.